God of War is clearly a staple in the video game industry, with massive critical and commercial success for nearly every game in the franchise. From the original release nearly 18 years ago to the 2018 reboot and even the portable spin-offs, it's a beloved series to so many and one of PlayStation's most reliable sources of legacy content. I played through the reboot earlier this year and reviewed it and evidently loved the game. I was let down a bit by the difficulty having some inconsistencies, the fast travel system being overly cumbersome, and the repetition of certain enemies which softened the impact of the truly fantastic combat, but I still thought it was great and especially enjoyed its unique world. I did want more of it though, since I didn't think they took enough advantage of the amazing 9 realms in the game. A few like Alfheim and Midgard were very fleshed out and well realized, but I thought it could have done more with its basis. And what would you know, they made a sequel. After I finally gave the last game a real chance and beat it, I was very excited for Ragnarok, and once one of the greatest trailers of all time at the September State of Play came around, I knew this may very well be a masterpiece. Is it though? Well, many people cite the last game as being a masterpiece, and I disagree, so we're gonna take a critical look at God of War Ragnarok and find out. Visually, this game knocks it out of the park. Obviously, I can't speak to how the PS4 version runs, but on PS5, this is one of the most technically solid experiences I've had. I literally had one noticeable glitch, and that was it. Incredibly impressive that it's so sound, but it's even more amazing to simply gaze upon how the game looks. Nearly every single realm in this game is beautiful in its own way. There isn't one area that looks bad, and there are so many incredible small details to notice. If you just stop and look around you, you'll notice that there are amazing living creatures surrounding you and blending into the background. Sony Santa Monica doesn't attempt to shove any of the technological prowess in your face here. In fact, they hide these small additions as best they can to make for a more organic experience, which just shows how much they care about fantastic world building over superficial spectacle. Vanaheim's mysterious, beautiful forests and amazing day-to-night transitions, Helheim's thick green tint that forces you to gaze within your own soul and the hopelessness of others' resting place, and Svartalfheim's rocky terrain slowly being overtaken by water. Every single area you visit has so much to offer. It's all memorable and creative with how these are presented, and with a continuation and even improvement of the character and enemy design variety, you simply cannot make any reasonable argument that Ragnarok isn't a graphical marvel. The music still goes so damn hard, with this booming set of voices speaking the tongue of the 9 realms, which, even though I can't understand a single lyric, the power exhibited by this music and its overall tone still shakes me to my core and eggs me on to continue through this amazing journey. And don't even get me started on the acting. Some of the single greatest performances in the gaming industry can be seen here once again, though this time around not just from Kratos and Freya. Every single character knocks it out of the park. Atreus, Brock, Sindri, Thor, Odin, and especially Freya sell the story better than I sell knives that definitely don't have hepatitis blood on them. This game really is an emotional roller coaster, which I'll dig into a bit more once I talk about the story, but what does truly help achieve that is how all of these actors play out their roles. Hell, even Mimir, the goddamn talking head, has an insanely emotional, touching moment near the end, and the actor perfectly pulls it off. In the 2018 game, these actors brought their unique characters to life and made this wild fantasy setting feel connected to a focused, grounded story that any person in the real world can relate to and get invested in. But this time around, they are great for building the world and for shaping some of the most impressive character arcs I've seen within a game. Christopher Judge as Kratos and Danielle Basutti as Freya specifically, wow, I have no words for these two other than amazing. Kratos already had gone through so much in the last game alone. I wondered if they could really make his story as impactful this time around, but due to the way his relationship with Atreus evolves, I think it may very well be better. And Freya? Jesus Christ. Her torment is not used as a device to remove any mental fortitude and turn her into an unreasonable character defined by one emotion, but rather she too goes through a complex journey that her actress perfectly displays. Many little conversations between her and the other characters build up and play a role in her eventual fluctuation in decision-making. I'm not exactly the biggest fan of characters who just snap from one angle to another unless, I don't know, they're criminally insane and meant to act like that. But what I love about these actors is that no matter what insane stuff happens, they stick true to the root of their character and continue to keep the story in a level-headed direction, making the payoff of some bombastic occurrence feel much more earned and satisfying. This is reflected by the continuation of the one-take camera style, which truly works here to great effect. I think it makes a bit more sense for 2018's story of this long journey toward the peak of the Nine Realms and toward a confrontation of the true past, but this game also phenomenally executes the feeling of one solid adventure that never loses sight of you, and that you never lose sight of. But you want to talk about the gameplay, don't you? Well, that's definitely the most important part, I cannot deny. Is it good? You betcha. God of War Ragnarok's combat is best described as more insane than me when I'm doing my Joker laugh. It never ceases to amaze me how many awesome things you can pull off in this game, and if you thought that applies to 2018, just wait. I legitimately feel like I'll never be able to go back to 2018's combat after playing this one, because it's just a simple fact that every single thing has been made better. Similar to Batman Arkham City to Asylum, Uncharted 2 to Uncharted 1, Horizon Forbidden West to Horizon Zero Dawn, and many more, there is not one downgrade in the combat system, but rather a whole lot of big upgrades. There is a much larger focus on mobility, which I love. The weight and heaviness of the last game's encounters is retained, and everything you do still feels impactful and gives you that sense of power that God of War games are so good at achieving. But you also have so many more options of how you can move around your foes. You can use the Blades of Chaos to grapple onto ledges and swing from one platform to another, which also allows you to slam down afterward with the momentum and... Come on, how can I not love the hell out of this move? It is so fun and satisfying to swing around like a madman and smash into an unwitting enemy on the ground that I find myself doing this a concerning number of times. You get so many opportunities to let your skill shine, and I really love how you can flow your moves together. Switching between weapons feels so instantaneous and much more necessary, keeping the movement the same but forcing your strategy to adapt as the threats around you change. And that bigger focus on momentum really makes it feel more exciting and fun throughout. I will be honest, there were points early in the last game where the combat got kind of repetitive, especially before you got your hands on the Blades of Chaos, but here I found both weapons to be equally useful and to have amazing moves. There's also a third weapon that you unlock, a very swift and slick spear that I always find a treat to use. I was always switching around based on what felt right, whereas in the last game I almost always preferred the more fluid motions of the Blades of Chaos. This ability Ragnarok has to give each of the three weapons a unique feel that works best in different situations truly does add tons of variety and enjoyment. Sony Santa Monica is quoted as having their game design philosophy be, play with your food, and I think that's the best outlook to have, at least with this kind of game. When I think about the greatest combat systems I've experienced, I think of games where your ability to fight off enemies is dependent on how you wield the many mechanics and abilities are at your disposal. This game truly succeeds in such a regard since I always loved experimenting, especially during the tougher fights, and finding a way to fight off enemies in a fun, flashy, and most importantly, satisfying way that worked for me. It allows for so much variation in how each player plays through the game. Play with your food. Gotta love it. But what about the gameplay outside of the combat? Well, there's a lot of content to experience here, which I appreciate, and though it's not all perfect, many of the side missions and activities are legitimately worth sinking time into and very creative. I adore many of these shorter experiences, such as freeing a massive jellyfish creature from the desert of Alfheim. This is a very creative, fun mission that builds a legitimate connection between Kratos, the player, and the world. As you venture through all of these places at your own pace, you find so many amazing secrets that are sometimes just as astonishing as the major twists and turns of the main story. Specific activities are also fantastic, such as the Berserker Gravestones. These may very well be the greatest side bosses in video game history, as their difficulty balance is perfection. You're constantly motivated to keep going because everything is fair, and no matter how insurmountable the odds seem with some of these battles, you'll eventually feel a true sense of accomplishment after defeating each one. You can literally discover a massive abandoned city with 2 dragons to fight in it by searching around Vanaheim, and that alone provides so many amazing new experiences that I never would have seen if I hadn't ventured off the beaten path. I felt far more motivated to upgrade my stuff, improve, and keep playing past the credits in this game than I ever did in the 2018 one. One negative I will cite is actually getting around these areas, and fully completing them can be a huge pain. I found it perfectly fine to get everything in Midgard, Helheim, Jotunheim, Muspelheim, Svartalfheim, and Alfheim, but in ones like Vanaheim, oh boy. I would search around for 20 minutes to get to an area just for the game to reveal that I had to instead change the time of day, which I couldn't do without traveling to a completely different part of the map. It's an annoying, cumbersome mechanic when you actually try to get everything in the realm, and I wish they had just added more spots where you could do this, specifically more spots to change the time in appropriate locations. There's far more variety in how you do move around, since you can grapple using the blades outside of combat as well, and in certain realms you have this cool dog sled, but there's still a bit too much reliance on the boat for you to travel around realms like Vanaheim and Svartalfheim for my liking. I think they could have made you move the damn thing a little bit faster, or just made it easier to get around on foot, since that's 100 times more fun than the boat. I'm also not a fan of how you're required to collect lore to get 100%. But if that's the level of insignificance that my complaints are reaching, then you know this game does a pretty damn good job. The puzzles and mechanics are generally very sound and sometimes legitimately challenging if you try to go for all of the Nornir and legendary chests. But this beautiful, cinematic, and tough but fair combat system is truly what defines the gameplay of Ragnarok and makes it such a phenomenal experience. In terms of gameplay pacing, it's also very solid, since the beginning, middle, and end are all super exciting, and though there are clear high points like the Nidhogg boss fight, which may very well be the second greatest in video game history, the entire game never dips down too far on the excitement, artistry, intrigue, and variety. You're really encouraged to push yourself further and further at your own pace, which I love. The difficulty balancing issues of the last game are gone, reduced to atoms here, since there was practically no encounter in the main story that I find myself absolutely despising, but rather a truckload of hard but engaging fun and creative fights. There is no equivalent to the godforsaken dark elf fight between the realms, in case you were wondering. And in general, they've also destroyed the other main issue with the last game, namely the mini-bosses. There are so many, I mean so many of these things to fight, and they're all so damn cool. None are actively infuriating, but continue to wow me with the scale of the battles against them and the pure insanity of their designs. A giant dog in Helheim that smashes its chains into you, a weird deer woman who will beat the ever-loving crap out of you with her hooves, 2 Valkyries at once, and, of course, the God of Thunder. That's just barely scratching the surface of what this game has to offer without spoiling anything, so get yourself ready for a wild ride. Briefly, I want to discuss spoilers, so skip ahead about 15 seconds or to this timestamp real quick if you haven't beaten the game yet. To summarize what I think of the spoiler-filled parts of the game, let me just say that Brock's death made me legitimately cry. Atreus' gameplay is very fun and unique, and though the segment where he meets Angrboda for the first time is far too long, it ends with a great boss fight against her grandma, and that amazing moment where you're running as the wolf. And the Odin fight is also one of the best I've ever played. Okay, now we're back to non-spoiler territory, now that I've gotten that out of my system. If I had one more small issue, it's that the fast travel system is still way too cumbersome, and though I understand certain adjustments being made to stop loading screens from appearing and keep the flow going, plus the fact that this is a PS4 game too is clear, but I still think the method of games like Ghost of Tsushima, Breath of the Wild, or Horizon to just click on an icon on the map and warp right there is far, far better. But now let's finish by talking about the story. Now, the story of the last game was pretty incredible due to how well it used a simple concept to really dig into interesting themes by fleshing out specific characters. It's kind of exactly like The Last of Us, but that's far from a bad thing. Ragnarok has a similar tactic where its themes are mostly explored by the characters, but this time around there's a much larger cast to consider, and yet they all have an arc, and if I'm being perfectly candid, I don't think a single one of them is bad. From Thor's daughter and the conflict caused by her father's insurmountable grief after the deaths of Magni and Modi causing her to feel uncertainty around every corner, to Kratos slowly feeling the inescapable nature of fate and falling back into his old habits, there is nothing here to complain about for me. It's one of the best video game stories of all time. Themes of war are far more prevalent here, which feels a bit appropriate for a game called, well, God of War, and I think Kratos' specific emotions toward his son growing and changing is pulled off extremely well. He begins to learn that he must learn things from his son, not that his son is simply without anything to show or teach. Friendship and love become less alien to him once again, and instead of a journey out of grief for one person, he has one that grows to become much more maturely justified. He once again wants to do something entirely for the sake of one member of his family, this time Atreus, but gradually it becomes clear that every person in these realms has their own story to be told, their own emotions that matter, and their own potential waiting to be unlocked by the cruel and simultaneously liberating nature of fate, leading him and the player to fully understand the value that they all have. It does truly remind me of other fantastic stories such as Horizon Forbidden West, wherein the value of every single person must be added to our main character, causing them to function as part of a larger, inspiring movement toward good, rather than simply an isolated story. That's truly a brilliant basis for these stories in my opinion, because experiencing a fantastical world and simultaneously a narrative all about its inhabitants fleshes said world out while also making the tale being told feel so much grander and more meaningful. It's those emotional highs, those plot lines and sayings that come full circle that make this truly exceptional. This adventure that we've been brought on through these two games never fails to feel satisfying and complete, specifically through the process of giving every main character a compelling arc. There is a much stronger connection between them and the player, which is always important. Family is another theme that gets built upon alongside sacrifice and war. These all go hand in hand as, through the value and love that family shows us, we realize the horror of war and conflict. And once we understand the value of an even larger family, we understand that sacrifice is sometimes a necessary undertaking. The desperation caused by a true love for one can end up causing more pain for others than we could ever know, and even for ourselves if we can't learn to accept the inevitability of change and death. It is important to love deeply, but as Kratos' late wife says, it is just as inescapable to, as a result, grieve painfully. Pain and love are connected with one another, but experiences continue no matter what. And after so much crazy stuff in this story, Mimir's stories, Kratos' blunt remarks, and the charming nature and humanity of all these often non-human characters still brought a reassuring smile to my face. Even in the most uncertain of times, we'll always have a link back to the core of what makes us who we are. As the sheer, pure scale of this game weighed down on me, I couldn't help but understand its level of quality. It is Infinity War and Endgame in one video game, with so many insightful character interactions, incredible lines, beautiful sights, charming people to connect with, tremendous spectacle, earth-shaking performances, masterful writing, and infinitely entertaining combat and world building. God of War Ragnarok is not just another amazing video game. It's not just another masterpiece. It's one of the greatest achievements in the history of gaming that demonstrates the true artistic value of mixing beauty, technological prowess, cinematic power, thematically impactful storytelling, and addictive gameplay into one big pot of nothing but art. Even though no game is without its issues, this game brushes them off to show the passion surging through every single one of its veins in a truly breathtaking display. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching to the end of this video, and if you enjoyed it and are new here, make sure to leave a like, comment, and even consider subscribing, because I've got a lot of cool videos coming up, such as similar reviews of Undertale and Breath of the Wild, and the Breath of the Wild one's gonna have a really cool montage that I think you guys will love. I've been sick recently, but I'm trying to put out some really great videos to end off 2022 before I take a much longer break at the start of 2023. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.